Let me describe someone you might know. They're talented, genuinely talented. The kind of person who walks into a room and people notice. They work hard, harder than most. They're charming, articulate, usually well-dressed. On paper, they have everything together. But here's what's happening underneath. Every morning, before they've fully woken up, they're already checking the phone, the notifications, the comments, the responses to what they posted last night, the metrics, the reactions, the numbers. And if the numbers are good, they feel okay. Temporarily okay. For maybe an hour, maybe 2. And if the numbers aren't good, or if someone said something critical, something dismissive, something that landed wrong, the entire day is compromised. The mood shifts. The confidence evaporates. The work feels pointless. The person feels pointless. And the terrifying part is they know this is happening. They can see it. They've read the articles. They've had the conversations. They tell themselves they don't care what people think. And then they refresh the page again. This is the validation junkie. And before you decide this isn't you, I want you to stay with me. Because this is not just about social media. This is not just about likes and followers and public performance. This goes so much deeper than that. This is about the fundamental architecture of how you decide every single day whether you are enough. Let's start with the brain, because before this is a psychological problem, it is a biological one. When you receive social approval, a compliment, a like, a nod of recognition, someone laughing at your joke, your boss praising your work, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in every addiction known to neuroscience, food, gambling, cocaine, romantic love. Dopamine doesn't evaluate the quality of the approval. It doesn't distinguish between genuine recognition of your actual worth as a human being and a stranger double tapping a photo on their phone at 2 a.m. It just fires. Every time, reliably, mechanically. And here's the cruelty of dopamine, the thing that makes it such a perfect engine for addiction. It habituates. The same dose produces less effect over time. What used to feel like enough, a few kind words, a good review, a round of applause, stops being enough. The baseline rises. The need escalates. So you need more visibility, more affirmation, more evidence that you exist and that your existence matters. And the withdrawal is real. Social rejection, being ignored, dismissed, criticized, or simply not acknowledged, activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. This is not a metaphor. Brain scans show it. The anterior cingulate cortex, the region that processes physical pain, lights up identically when you are socially excluded as when you stub your toe. Being unseen hurts, literally, physiologically. So the brain learns the way it always learns, through consequence and repetition. Approval equals relief. Disapproval equals pain. Seek approval. Avoid disapproval at all costs. This is not weakness. This is not vanity. This is a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do, optimizing for safety. The problem is that it is optimizing for a version of safety that requires other people's opinions to be constantly favorable. And that is a prison with no walls. Because other people's opinions are never, not once, not ever, fully within your control. Now here's the part that actually matters. Because dopamine explains the mechanism, but it doesn't explain the wound. The validation junkie is not created by social media. Social media is just the most efficient delivery system ever invented for a hunger that was already there. a hunger that was carved into you, in most cases, before you were old enough to understand what was happening. Think about what a child needs. Not wants, needs. A child needs to be seen, truly seen. Not managed, not directed, not evaluated, not coached, seen. Looked at with full attention and told, without words, through presence and warmth and genuine delight. You exist, and your existence is good. When that happens consistently, when a child is securely, unconditionally seen, something extraordinary occurs. They develop what psychologists call intrinsic worth, an internal sense of value that does not require external confirmation, a baseline of okayness that persists even when the world is not applauding. But when it doesn't happen, when the seeing is conditional, inconsistent, or absent, the child's developing psyche makes an adaptation, a logical, reasonable, devastating adaptation. If I am not seen automatically, I must earn being seen. I must perform being seen. I must become whatever version of myself generates the most positive response from the people whose opinion determines my safety. And the performance begins, not consciously, not as a deliberate strategy, as a survival response, as the only available tool a child has for securing the attention and approval that their nervous system requires like oxygen. And then they grow up, and the parents are replaced by teachers, then peers, then bosses, then followers, then the anonymous crowd of the internet. But the original equation never gets updated. My worth is not inherent. My worth is produced by their reaction to my performance. That equation is running right now, in more people than you would believe. In people who are, by every external measure, extraordinarily successful, famous, admired, accomplished, and still refreshing the page. Now we go deeper, because Jung understood something about this dynamic that most modern psychology still hasn't fully integrated. He called it the persona, the mask, the curated, socially acceptable, strategically constructed version of the self that we present to the world. Every human being develops one. It is not pathological. It is necessary. Social life requires some degree of performance, some calibration of self-presentation to context. The problem begins when the persona becomes the primary project, when the construction and maintenance of how you appear to others starts to consume the energy that should be going into who you actually are. And here is the Jungian horror at the center of the validation cycle. The more approval you chase, the more you hollow yourself out. Because to be approved of by everyone, you must offend no one. And to offend no one, you must sand down every edge, every strong opinion, every inconvenient truth, every part of you that is specific, idiosyncratic, genuinely yours. All of it gets smoothed into a surface that is reflective, agreeable, broadly palatable. And then people approve of that. They applaud the performance. They validate the persona. They like the post, attend the show, praise the output. And somewhere underneath all of that approval, the real self grows hungrier. Because the validation you are receiving cannot reach the part of you that actually needs it. The approval is landing on the mask. And the face behind the mask, the actual you, the specific, unpolished, unperformed you, has never been seen at all. You are being praised for a performance of yourself. And the part of you that knows the difference between performance and reality, it registers this. It knows the applause is not for you. And the loneliness of that, of being surrounded by approval and still feeling fundamentally unseen. That loneliness is one of the most specific, most suffocating, and most common experiences of modern life. Jung also warned about what happens when too much energy goes into the persona and not enough into the shadow, the rejected, unacknowledged parts of the self. The shadow doesn't disappear. It grows. It accumulates everything that couldn't be expressed without risking approval. The anger, the ambivalence, the desires that didn't fit the performance, the doubts, the parts of the self that were too much or too little for the audience. And the shadow will find its way out. It always does. In self-sabotage, in sudden, inexplicable collapses, in the private self that is shockingly different from the public one, in the 3 AM version of you that they carefully curated. Instagram grid was specifically designed to prevent anyone from seeing. Now I want to name the versions of this that are less obvious, because the validation junkie doesn't always look like someone obsessing over their follower count. Sometimes it looks like the person who cannot make a decision without polling everyone around them first. Who says, "What do you think?" Not as genuine inquiry, but as anxiety management. Who needs the room to validate the choice before they can commit to it? Sometimes it looks like the chronic over-explicable. The person who cannot simply say no. They have to construct an entire legal defense for it. Who over-apologizes, over-justifies, over-contextualizes every position they take, because somewhere underneath, they believe that without sufficient explanation, their position, and therefore they, will not be acceptable. Sometimes it looks like the compulsive helper. The person whose generosity is real, genuinely real, but is also quietly entangled with the need to be needed, to be indispensable, to be the person everyone turns to, because being needed feels like the safest, most reliable form of being valued. Sometimes it looks like intellectual performance. The person who is genuinely intelligent, but who deploys that intelligence primarily as a social instrument, who dominates conversations not out of genuine enthusiasm, but out of the need to be the most informed, most referenced, most impressive, because in the absence of being loved freely, being the smartest in the room is the next best available substitute. And sometimes, this is the most invisible form. It looks like the person who has fully, completely outsourced their self-concept to their achievements, who cannot separate what they do from who they are, for whom failure is not a setback but an identity collapse, because their worth was never internal. It was always located in the next output, the next result, the next validation of their productivity. Do you recognize any of these? Because most people recognize at least one, and recognizing it is not a reason for shame. It is a reason for inquiry. Here's the thing about external validation, the thing nobody tells you when you're deep inside the cycle. It works. It genuinely, temporarily, measurably works. The dopamine fires. The anxiety quiets. The sense of okayness returns. For an hour, for a day, sometimes for longer. The problem is not that it doesn't work. The problem is that it doesn't accumulate. You cannot store external validation. You cannot build it into a permanent internal resource. Every dose expires. Every achievement's worth fades. Every compliment has a half-life. And then you are back at zero or worse, because the tolerance has risen and zero now feels like deficit. There is exactly one form of approval that accumulates, that compounds, that builds into something structural rather than something that needs to be constantly renewed. And it is the one form that the validation junkie is most terrified of pursuing. The approval of yourself, not self-esteem in the bumper sticker sense, not affirmations in the mirror, not forced positivity over genuine self-assessment. The specific, earned, honest sense of okayness that comes from making choices that are aligned with your actual values, not your performed values, your actual ones, and from looking at yourself clearly without the distortion of either self-attack or self-inflation, and finding that you can live with who you see. That form of approval does not require an audience. It does not depend on external conditions. It does not have a comment section. And building it requires the single most difficult thing the validation junkie is asked to do: disappoint people. Deliberately, repeatedly, with full awareness. Say the thing that might not land. Make the choice that the room doesn't understand. Create the work that is yours, rather than the work most likely to be well received. Let the numbers drop if the numbers are attached to a version of you that isn't real. Because every time you choose your own honest response over the performed one, every time you prioritize your genuine self over the applause for your curated self, you make a deposit into the only account that actually holds value. The account of knowing who you are. And knowing who you are, truly, uncomfortably, specifically knowing, that is the one thing that makes external validation optional rather than urgent. Not easy, not undesirable, just optional. And optional is the only version of freedom that is real. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Not as a challenge, not as an accusation, as a genuine, open, worth sitting with question. Who are you? Specifically, honestly, uncomfortably, who are you when no one is watching? Not the version you'd be comfortable with people seeing. Not the edited version. Not the version that would make sense to your audience. The unperformed version. The specific, private, unvalidated, real version. Because that version, that one, has probably not been getting a lot of airtime lately. It has been living underneath the performance. Patient, quiet, increasingly hungry. And here is what I know about that version of you. It is not as acceptable as the performed version. It is more specific, more complicated, more contradictory, more human. It has opinions that would alienate some people, desires that would confuse others, weaknesses that the curated version was specifically designed to conceal. But it is also the version of you that is actually alive. The performed version is impressive. The performed version earns applause. But the real version is the one that can look someone in the eyes without calculating the angle. That can sit in silence without reaching for the phone. That can fail, genuinely, publicly fail, and still know, somewhere underneath the sting, that the failure does not define the worth. That version doesn't need the numbers to be good. That version already knows what it is. The question, the only real question, is whether you're willing to meet it. Whether you're willing to stop performing long enough to find out who is doing the performing. Because the validation you have been chasing your entire life, the deep, real, bone-level sense of being enough, was never going to come from them. It was always waiting for you to stop looking out there and look in.